She loved him through the lies. He lost her through the truth. But some stories don't end, they ache, they heal, they begin again. Elvira thought she had buried their story. Trees never stopped writing it. In the wreckage of truth and the beauty of what remained, they discover that love isn't always gentle, but it might still be enough. Prologue. Dira was on her way home to Fairview when she got stranded along EDSA due to traffic. Bored, she turned on the stereo in her Porsche so she could at least entertain herself by listening to music, while the flow of vehicles on the road moved at a snail's pace. She had promised her mommy and daddy that she'd come home early to join them for dinner. But by 6 in the evening, the traffic on EDSA was already terrible. She took her cell phone out of her bag and dialed her mother's number. "Hello. Ma, I'm on my way home. But the traffic on EDSA is really heavy. I might take a while. You and Dad go ahead and eat without me." "No, honey. We can wait. You know how special this day is, right?" "Yeah, it's your 25th wedding anniversary." "Exactly. We'll wait for you, Dira." Dira ended the call with her mom as the car in front of her finally began to move. She glanced at a paper bag resting on the passenger seat. Before heading home, she had stopped by a jewelry store to buy a gift for her parents. She smiled, certain they would be delighted with the couple's diamond wristwatch she had chosen, a limited edition, no less. She had spent her entire month's salary on it. Even though it was expensive, it was durable and definitely worth the price. She works as an executive interior designer and the CEO of Elvira Designs & Company, a sister company of Montenegro Construction, which is owned and managed by her father, Enrico. She is the heiress of these companies, which is why she does everything she can to prove her worth. As the couple's only child, she carries a huge responsibility in their business, even at the young age of 25. It took her 2.5 hours to reach their home from Makati City. She honked outside the gate, waiting for the guard to open it. But 5 minutes had passed, and no one had come to let her in. She stepped out of the car and pressed the doorbell at the guardhouse, but there was no response. "Damn. Where is the guard?" she asked in frustration, her thoughts racing. Luckily, she had a spare key to their gate, which she quickly pulled from her bag. Terror surged through her as the gate swung open. The guard was lying unconscious on the ground, bleeding, with a gunshot wound to his abdomen. Her hand flew to her mouth in shock as she rushed to him. He was dead. No breathing. No movement. Heart pounding, Vera ran into the house, panic rising in her chest. "Mommy! Daddy!" she cried out. She froze in horror as she saw the 3 housemaids lying lifeless and bloodied on the floor of the living area. Vera's entire body trembled. "No. No. No," she said, shaking her head in disbelief. "Mommy! Daddy!" In the dining room, she spotted her parents. Just like the others, they were covered in blood and lifeless, both with gunshot wounds to the head. Sobbing uncontrollably, Vera's knees gave way as she approached them. "Mommy! Daddy!" she cried out. "This isn't happening. This isn't real. Mommy! Daddy!" Her voice grew hoarse from all the screaming and crying. In shock and despair, she stumbled to the living room phone and dialed the police station's hotline. A few minutes later, the police arrived. They immediately inspected the entire house and searched for any evidence that could help with the case. "Ms. Montenegro, it looks like the murderer knew where the CCTV control room was located. There are no CCTV files from today. Someone erased them," the police chief told her shortly after. Vera could only cry. She couldn't believe what had happened. How could it be that both her parents were now gone? Why did this happen? So many questions, yet she had no answers. And Ms. Montenegro, robbery was not the motive for this killing. It appears the murder of your parents was premeditated. The house helpers and the guard were merely caught in the incident. Vera turned to the officer, shocked. "What do you mean by that?" "Someone was seeking revenge. We still have to investigate further." We'll give you a call with any updates on the case. Whoever did this. I'll make sure they pay, Vera said through gritted teeth. Whoever killed her parents had no heart. She would make that demon pay for what they did to her family. She would never stop until she got justice for her parents. Chapter 1. Vera. Hey, honey. Where are you? Trees called out to his wife when he didn't find her in the kitchen. Normally, whenever he came home from work, he would find her there cooking. But today, the house felt empty. He headed to their bedroom, but she wasn't there either. Trees clenched his fists. What he hated the most was losing sight of Vera. Even when he was at the office, he kept her under constant watch. He had secretly installed CCTV cameras around their condominium unit. And at her workplace, he had people reporting to him about everything his wife did. Hey, honey. You're home already, Vera said as she peeked into their bedroom, carrying several plastic bags in her hands. Where have you been? Trees asked, following her into the kitchen. I went to the supermarket. I didn't realize our fridge was almost empty, so I just did some shopping, she replied, flashing him a smile. Elvira was simply beautiful. Even without makeup or fancy, revealing clothes, she still looked stunning. Wearing that? Trees asked, his brows furrowed. She was dressed in a white sleeveless blouse and short denim shorts. Even though the blouse was loose, it still hinted at the graceful curves of her body, and her fair, long legs were clearly visible beneath the short hem of her shorts. His temper flared at the thought of how many men at the supermarket might have stared at his beautiful wife. What? I don't think there's anything wrong with what I'm wearing, Vera said while busy unpacking groceries into the refrigerator. Trees grabbed her by the shoulders and pulled her close. You know I don't like it when you go out alone, Vera, Trees said, his face just inches from hers. Trees, you don't have to worry. I can take care of myself, she replied gently. Trees softly cupped his wife's beautiful face. I'm not worried about you. I'm worried about the men who might desire you, he said, then pressed his lips to hers. Vera moaned as Trees deepened the kiss. Heat surged through Vera's entire body. Trees. She gasped, her voice trembling as pleasure built within her. Yes, honey, he whispered back, his lips brushing hers as he spoke. God, I love it when you do that, Vera said with a smile, hugging him tightly. Trees kissed her again, this time more intensely. Vera moaned with pleasure. He carried her to their bedroom, where their passion continued. So, what do you want for dinner? Vera asked a while later, still astride him after their lovemaking. I've already had dinner, there's still room for a second round, Trees replied while teasingly kissing her. Vera gasped at the sensation of Trees' tongue on her neck. Stop. I'm starving. I didn't have any snacks this afternoon, and now I'm really hungry, she whispered, even as he continued. But Trees ignored her protest. Trees, we can do it again later, please, she pleaded softly. He glanced at her briefly, then kissed her again, one she eagerly returned. All right, let's eat, he said, gently helping her off him and setting her on the bed. Completely naked, he walked out of the bedroom. And well, his gym-sculpted body was definitely something to be proud of. Vera slipped on his oversized white shirt and followed him. She found him in the kitchen, preparing pasta. She smiled. Trees was the kind of man you'd never tire of looking at, even unclothed. He was far from repulsive. He was handsome, confident, and sexy. She considered herself truly lucky to be his wife. He was her perfection. Her everything. She loved this man deeply. 2 years ago, after her parents' tragic death, Vera had been devastated, so broken that she felt she had no reason to keep living. She neglected their family business, and eventually it sank into bankruptcy. That's when Trees offered his help. He pulled her back on her feet, and helped her company rise again. Trees proposed to her, and without hesitation, she accepted. She knew deep in her heart she loved him. And Trace loved her just as much. Oh, it's so nice to see a naked chef in my kitchen, Vera said teasingly, grinning as she took a seat on the stool by the kitchen's bar area. Trees glanced at her over his shoulder and winked. That view's for your eyes only. He continued stirring the sauce with casual ease. Well, thank you for the beautiful view, my husband, she replied with a playful smile. Once the pasta was ready and plated, Trace joined her and gently fed her a bite. She smiled as soon as she tasted it. Trees wasn't just handsome and sexy, he was also a great cook. He really was the complete package. After dinner, he scooped her up and brought her back to their bedroom. Never in his life could he ever grow tired of Vera. He would love her for eternity. She was his, and no one could ever take her away from him. He would do everything to keep her by his side. Vera was awakened by the sound of the alarm clock. She was still sleepy, having fallen asleep with Trees only in the early hours of the morning. Her husband had certainly proven his stamina last night. He was tireless, seemingly insatiable. She was completely worn out from their lovemaking. As much as she wanted to sleep a little longer, she had to get up. She had an early meeting with a major client of Elvira Designs and Company. Still feeling sluggish, Vera dragged herself out of bed. Trees wasn't in the room. He must have left early without waking her. Naked, she headed for the bathroom. Trees always went to the office first. By 7 in the morning, he was already at Montenegro Construction Company. He had taken over her father's company after buying all its shares during its financial downfall. Trees was wealthy, one of the top business tycoons in the country. He also owned one of the Metro's premier 6-star hotels. Vera considered herself incredibly lucky to have him in her life. She had everything she could ever ask for. Chapter 2. Trees saw Elvira leaving the house through the CCTV monitor. He picked up his phone and called her office. Hello, Elvira Designs and Company. How may I help you? Her secretary, Diane, answered on the other line. Diane, this is Trees. Would you mind telling me where and when Elvira's appointment is today? Oh, Sir Trees. Let me check for a moment, she replied. A few seconds later, she came back on the line. Sir, her meeting is at Sapphire Hotel at 9:30 a.m. Okay, thanks, Trees said, ending the call. He then pressed the intercom button and called his own secretary. Leah, cancel all my meetings this morning. I have an urgent matter to attend to at my hotel. Okay, sir. I'll inform them. Thank you, he said, glancing at the photo on his desk, a wedding picture of him and Vera. Then, he put on his suit jacket, which had been hanging on the back of his chair, and left the office. The Sapphire Hotel wasn't far from Montenegro Construction. It was just a 20-minute drive without traffic. He owned the hotel as well and often reserved a conference room there whenever he had client meetings for Montenegro. Vera fixed herself up. Upon arriving at Sapphire Hotel, she headed straight to the powder room. This was a big day, not just for her, but for Elvira Designs and Company. Her client was a big name, the owner of a well-known resort in Palawan. The entire El Paraíso resort was up for renovation, and her company had been chosen for the job. Hopefully, the client would agree to their terms and conditions, especially when it came to costs, expenses, and, of course, the professional fee. Okay, she breathed. This wasn't the first time she was meeting with a major client, but for some reason, her nerves were on edge. She stepped out of the powder room and made her way to the hotel restaurant, where her secretary had made a reservation for the meeting. She briefly spoke with one of the staff members, who then guided her to her table. After a few minutes, someone approached. Vera looked up, and was stunned to see her husband standing there. Tree smiled at her. Frowning, she asked, "What are you doing here?" "I have a client to meet here." "What about you?" "I'm also meeting a client, the owner of El Paraíso Resort. But he hasn't arrived yet." She sat down at the table. He? Trees repeated, eyes narrowing. Yes. He owns the resort, Vera replied casually. Have you had breakfast? He crossed his arms over his chest. "What do you mean by breakfast?" he said, then gave her a slow once-over. His grin widened. Vera pouted. She already knew what was running through her husband's mind, his gaze said it all. And yes, she knew him too well. "I have plenty of rooms here," he said with a wink. "Seriously?" she gasped, stunned. Hadn't he worn himself out from their intense lovemaking last night? They were at it until dawn. She was completely exhausted, and now he wanted more? Phew. Trace really was adventurous. So? He teased. "Honey, no. I have a client meeting. This is important, for me and my company." "We can do it later," she said firmly. His expression darkened. "I don't like that dress. You should throw it away or burn it." "This is my favorite, Trees." "It was a gift from my mom," Vera replied. Her voice softened, and her expression fell at the mention of her mother. It had been 2 years since her parents were murdered, but the pain still lingered. The suspect had eventually been caught and was now behind bars. 2 months after the incident, the man had turned himself in. According to his statement, he had planned to rob the house but panicked and ended up killing her parents and others inside. Overcome with guilt, he confessed. Justice had been served, but Vera still couldn't fully accept her parents' absence. The wound hadn't healed. Trees noticed the sadness creeping into her face and immediately stood up. "I'm sorry, I have to go. My clients might already be in the conference room," he said, excusing himself. "Okay," Vera said simply. Trees had only taken a few steps when he passed a man in a black suit walking directly toward Vera's table. Trees turned and scanned the man from head to toe. He was good-looking. Respectable. The man smiled at Vera, who, in turn, looked completely stunned, staring at his face in disbelief. Trees cursed under his breath. His jaw clenched as he looked back at his wife. Instead of leaving, he searched for an empty table not far from hers and sat down. "Hi, Ms. Montenegro," the man greeted. Vera froze. Recognition flickered in her eyes. He wasn't her expected client. He wasn't the owner of El Paraíso Resort. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice tinged with anger. The man grinned. "If you want a contract for the El Paraíso project, I'm here as a representative." "My boss had an urgent matter and couldn't make it," he said with a smirk, trailing his gaze slowly over her body. Vera instantly felt uncomfortable, uneasy under his stare. She despised this man. She never wanted to see him again, much less cross paths with him. Yet here he was. Clearing her throat, she asked, "Okay, so you're the representative?" "Like I said. Take a seat. And just to correct you, it's Mrs. de Leon. I'm married." "I know," the man said as he sat down. "You still look beautiful and sexy. Robert, stop flirting." "I'm not interested in you," she said bluntly. He clucked his tongue. "You were head over heels in love with me 2 years ago. That was before." "And I love my husband," Vera replied firmly, placing extra weight on her final words. The nerve. He even had the gall to remind her of her past foolishness. She had been in a relationship with that bastard 2 years ago. She loved him, truly believed his feelings were genuine. But in the end, she found out the painful truth: he was only using her for his own selfish gain. It wasn't her he loved. It was her money. Unbelievable. The nerve of him, to sit there and throw my past in my face like a joke. As if he didn't rip my heart out and leave me with nothing but shame. 2 years ago, I was foolish enough to believe in him. I thought it was love, real, honest love. I clung to his sweet words, the empty promises, the affection that now feels so rehearsed in hindsight. All along, I was just a stepping stone. A wallet. A way in. That's all I ever was to him. He didn't love me. He loved what I could give him, my money, my name, my future. And when that ran out, so did he. And now he dares to show up, pretending it never happened. acting as if he still has a place in my world. He doesn't. That door is sealed shut. I'm not the same woman he used to manipulate. I've rebuilt what he tried to ruin. I've learned how to fight for myself. And I won't let him take a single piece of me ever again. He left her during the time she needed him the most. When her parents died, when her company went bankrupt, Robert vanished like smoke. Disappeared without a trace. And with Teresa's unwavering support, her company slowly rose from the ashes. Through him, she learned to love again. To trust again. Teresa's blood boiled as he heard the man's words. So this was the one who had abandoned Vera 2 years ago. He stood up and began walking slowly toward them. That man would now face the consequences, Teresa's own brand of retribution, for his wife, Elvira. So, are you saying that? Robert asked, his eyes once again drifting shamelessly over her body, you're not trying to seduce me or my beau. He didn't get to finish. A clenched fist slammed into Robert's jaw, cutting his sentence short. His chair toppled to the ground along with him. Vera shot to her feet in shock, her eyes darting toward whoever had struck him. It was Therese. Damn you, bastard! Therese shouted at Robert, about to lunge at him again when Vera quickly stepped in and held him back. Therese! Stop, she pleaded, grabbing onto his arm. Therese turned to her with fiery eyes. See? I told you not to wear that dress. There are demons out there who want you. But I'll never let them have you. You are mine. Only mine. Vera froze, stunned. This was the first time she'd ever seen Therese this angry. He was like a beast unleashed. That punch? That's not even close to what you deserve, Therese barked, turning again to Robert. You owe Vera so much. Asshole. Robert merely grinned, wiping the blood from his lip with the back of his hand. He stood and looked at the couple coldly. I'll make sure Mr. Kong hears about how you treat clients, he said, a smug twist in his voice, only fueling Teresa's rage. And I'll make sure your boss knows exactly what kind of parasite you are, Therese shot back through gritted teeth. Robert's bravado faltered ever so slightly. He adjusted his suit, then briskly walked out of the restaurant. Chapter 3. Vera kept sighing as she sat inside the SUV Therese was driving. After everything that happened at the restaurant earlier, her husband had insisted on driving her back to the Elvira Designs and Company office. Trailing behind them was the hotel driver in her Porsche, following in convoy. You don't need that project, after all, Therese said, his eyes focused on the road. Therese, I need that project. Why? I can line up bigger contracts for you, Vera. Just say the word. Montenegro has dozens of new developments. I can easily recommend your firm to our clients. But I want El Paraíso, badly. And now it feels like it's slipping away, Vera said, her voice cracking, on the verge of tears. Her company had never landed a project with a prestigious resort before. This was her chance to prove that Elvira Designs and Company could handle large-scale, high-profile clients. It wasn't just about money, it was about recognition, about proving that her firm could rise again and stand among the top names in the industry. Therese felt a heaviness in his chest, a gnawing urgency he couldn't ignore. Seeing Vera like this, disheartened, holding back tears, grated on every nerve in his body. He couldn't stand it. He wouldn't. She'd fought so hard to rebuild herself, to restore her name, her company, her light, and now someone dared to try and snuff that out again? No. Not on his watch. That bastard. Therese clenched his jaw. He'd make sure Robert paid. Not out of jealousy, but for every tear Vera almost shed today. For every wound she reopened just by seeing that man's face. There would be consequences. Because no one hurts Elvira de Leon, not without answering to her husband. After dropping his wife off, Therese headed straight to his office. Without wasting time, he instructed his secretary to run a background check on the owner of El Paraíso Resort. He absent-mindedly spun his fountain pen between his fingers, deep in thought. He was already calculating his next moves, strategizing how to remove Robert from the picture, and more importantly, how to secure a deal with El Paraíso Resort. He was Tres de Leon. A man who didn't accept defeat. And when it came to Elvira, he would move heaven and earth. Whatever it took, he would do it. For her. Dira entered their home with a heavy heart. She hadn't heard anything yet from El Paraíso. Maybe Mr. Kong, the resort owner, had changed his mind. Maybe he was no longer interested in making a deal with her company after what happened. She sank into the sofa, exhausted. Losing the El Paraíso project felt like a gut punch. That bastard Robert had ruined everything again, just as he had before. As if destroying her life once hadn't been enough, now he had come back to cause even more damage. Elvira was startled when Tres appeared in front of her. He wore a loose white shirt and khaki pants. He smelled faintly of sandalwood. His hair was damp from the shower. "Are you okay?" he asked, voice filled with concern.